It may seem difficult at first, but everything is difficult at first. Miyamoto Musashi, my friends, let's jump into these charts. And again, keep that advice in mind. When you start trading, now again, if you've been in this up market since this thing turned around and we got the sign of this going up crazy back in March, that is late March, that is the week beginning the 20th of March, you got in either then or here, you've just thought yourself a genius as things have been running up, 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 up. A monkey could have jumped in at any point in here and done well. Well, things, they look like they may be a-changing. And again, that difficulty that Miyamoto Musashi talks about might be about to hit you in the face. So what do we see going on with the S&P? We have a down week. The first red candle we have seen since this down week here that we collected, what was it? A 2.63% return in 3 weeks. And of course, we collected a 2.88 return on this run up. And then of course, this last one, it was 12%, 12 over 13 maybe. The last I counted, it was 12.63, but it's gone up a couple of percent since then. And of course, we stalled out here on the line last week, and now we have this red down candle. I'm getting ready to go short on my next practice trade. We see that we have 3 down, 2-day down candles here. Now it's Wednesday, so this is the first day of the latest 2-day candle, so it only represents 5 days, of course. What do we see on the half day? Started moving down last Wednesday, the 2nd, and of course moved down, then sideways, then down again, and going in the right direction. You might say, Tom, how do you make money when markets crash? Got a great training for you. I put at the end of today's video. It's exactly that. Inverse funds, how to make money when markets crash. You want to start practice trading those potentially. What's the inverse fund on the S&P 500? Not SN, but SH. That is a ProShares short. Single short. It means it's not one of those highly leveraged triple inverses, that crazy stuff, just a single inverse. Now again, has its pluses and minuses, mostly pluses, but it's revalued daily. It's typically, most people will tell you it's for the short term. I do urge you to practice trade it and see what it does for you, if indeed you make a decision to jump in on an up move on a practice trade if you've not already jumped in. Now, what we've been doing as of late on our practice trades when it comes to the weekly chart is looking how things look on Friday. Doesn't mean you've hit the high or the low. Typically, just a time to jump in when you're secure that that candle is going to stay red for the week. We've seen candles like in here. I remember 1 or 2 of these turned red and then flipped back over to green. And of course, if you would have entered early that week, you would have gotten hammered by this up move. So we want to make sure things are going to roll over. We can see this decent volume here. We can see this decent volume here starting things off. We had a little bitty candle and we had lots of volume. What does that tell you? Well, if you've taken our study on volume, if you go to chartingwealth.com and see what we put up last week on volume, and also look for our volume training. I tell you what, I'm going to put the volume training at the end of today's video too. So you're going to have inverse funds and volume. You should get a lot out of both of those. Patreon members, thank you for your support. Of course, they underwrite the channel and help us be able to produce all of this for all the rest of you for free. So please thank your Patreon supporters because they help underwrite the cost of the channel and all the work I do here for you. So let's talk about where we are. You can see that we're under the prior trend line. We haven't reset the trend line yet because we got really nothing to set it to. And we see that the half day is well underneath that prior weekly trend line. Let's go on to the Qs. About a ditto here, same thing. We saw that last week was even weaker for the Qs. Look at the spinning top right here, almost a doji. Now look at it on the S&P. See how it's right there on the line, and on the Qs, NASDAQ 100, it's below it. Yes, so even weaker there. Again, moving down now. What, for those of you who want to know what the inverse fund for the NASDAQ 100 is, PSU. Q. There are others, but this is again the ProShare single short. Does have higher fees, does revalue on a daily basis, so it can multiply losses, but it can also give you some decent gains on your practice trade if you use what you're learning. And of course, you can see here, very helpful to look at the volume. You can see where we pegged down. I mean, look how things increased in volume as we got to the lows, and then with that doji higher than average, that's what this black line is, volume, and then things switched over. Typically, that's a good sign. I want you to study the volume training and understand it better. Okay, we're going to leave PSQ. We're going to leave our stocks, that is the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P 500. We're going to go to bonds. Where bonds? Well, bonds are up a little bit for the day. You can see where bonds bottomed out back on last Thursday and have slowly been trying to claw their way back up and track further up. Now, let's take a look at where bonds are on the weekly chart. Bonds have, they were sliding sideways and getting pretty weak there. Wasn't really excited a lot about bonds. They bottomed out last week, haven't hit that low yet, but look at all that volume. Now, what does that volume tell us? Well, it can tell us a couple of things. It can tell us it was searching for a low there and maybe found it and is just going to sort of drag here for a minute and go back up. Or maybe we'll continue watching the volume here and on the 2-day. And again, that 2-day, that is the Thursday, Friday, that corresponds to the high volume we see on the weekly. See, that's why it's important for us. We call this three-wave trading. Why? Because we're using all three charts and looking at volume on all three time frames and comparing them together and using what we've learned from the likes of the Jesse Livermores of the world, who I'm dedicating the next book that I'm working on right now to, a trader back in the 1920s, who was big into volume. Back then, all they had was ticker tape. And the ticker gave you two things, price and volume. And Jesse was able to sit there along with the other, technical analysis guys of the day, put together their own little charts and pay close attention to what volume was telling him. So, take that volume training. You'll get a lot out of it. So what do we see going on? Well, we see bonds trying to move up. We see where the latest high was about here. Looks like they're holding right now on the half day. We saw where things popped up on Tuesday and then sort of trying to catch back up. We see a little bitty green candle here, first day of the latest 2-day candle. We'll see what bonds do tomorrow and if they roll over and keep going down. So we don't know. We're keeping an eye on things. We will follow it. What about gold? Gold down for the day, which is good to see because gold broke last week. Very similar setup to the NASDAQ, if you remember me showing you that. Only difference, we got a green doji there. On the NASDAQ, we got a red doji on gold. And of course, gold rolling over this week. And we'll work to reset that trend line when we got something to do it with. We could, and y'all seen me do this before, we could try and cheat a little bit, and we could move the 2-day chart over to see things maybe a little early. Sometimes I do that when I feel like I want to get a feel for things, but I don't typically like to do it. I like to do it when I actually have candles that are set up and allow me to do it on the weekly because I'm trading off the weekly chart. But I'm not totally opposed to it. Again, we got to be flexible here. Remember, we have rules, but the rules are meant to work. And when you're trading on a chart and the rules aren't working, you might be in a chart that doesn't work. But if you find something, I call this a magic total trading chart. When I find that, for years, we were able to trade off the half-day chart in gold over and over and over and over and over again because it just worked. Then, this was prior to COVID, and I can't remember, it must have been 2019, maybe in January, it stopped working. But for quite a while, I had a total trading chart on just the half-day chart on gold, and it was beautiful. And, I would have people, I'd say, oh, the total trading chart on gold. Hang on. We don't see anything on the weekly yet. Well, you're going against the week. I was like, guys, go back in time, backtrack the half-day chart. Do you see how it works over and over and over and over again? Yeah, I do, but I'm like, what are you, an engineer? I mean, what do you care? If you find something that works, I don't care what the rules are. If it works time and time and time and time and time again, you're a fool not to practice trade it, see if it works, and use it. Come on, let's use our heads here. The only thing we care about is what? Making money in the market, making our practice trades work. Now, the reason I always throw in practice trades is I'm not here to give you market advice. I'm not a stock calling service. You guys don't pay me anything. Last thing I'm going to do is start telling you how to spend your money. That's your money. You can throw it away if you want, because if you're trying to jump into the market without proper training, without proving to yourself, first with paper trading and then with fractional trading where you use a small dollar amount, like $100 to buy a share and keep yourself honest and see what you can do, you're a fool, because the experts on Wall Street will fool you time and time again, and they will take every penny you have. And if you're dumb enough to margin things, they'll take more than you have. So that is what we see going on with gold. It is moving down and it's looking decent. Okay. And by the way, there is not an inverse fund for gold. That is why when we short gold, we practice trade options in gold. Now there is an inverse fund, DGZ, but it is illiquid, so we don't use it. We don't like illiquid funds. Why? Because if there's a $2, $3 spread between your getting in point and what you've got to make up to sell, that's like buying a house and then immediately trying to sell it. Well, you got to pay a realtor at least 6%, right? So you're down 6% even if you sell it at the same price. Same with a car. You drive a new car off the lot, it goes down substantially. Not liquid. So the gold inverse ETF is not liquid, so that's why we do options. Now, you want to learn about options? Become a Patreon member at any of the 3 levels. We got a 3-unit course, Options Made Simple, the Charting Wealth Way. It's the first thing you get when you become a Patreon supporter. Now let's move to XBTF. That is the VanEck Bitcoin Strategy ETF, down 1.98% for the day, going in the right direction. Pretty sloppy. We're right there on it on the half day. We're rolling over in the afternoon. That's the 2-day. Rolling over in the afternoon on the half day. And again, that movement is around the weekly trend line, which is almost flat, which is pretty worthless. So where am I right now in any practice trades on Bitcoin? I'm nowhere, because I'm waiting for this chart to become chartable, because it's really not. Now, we have talked about how at the beginning of the year, we've seen it go from the opening of 1692 to a high of 2031.22. That's pretty decent. It's gone up and pulled back, gone up and pulled back, gone up and pulled back. Now, none of these times did you know if it was going to pull back a whole lot farther. I mean, it literally started here, pulled back to almost the same spot, and then thankfully turned around. Popped up and then pulled back to below the spot where it started, and then popped up again. And on this one, it is pulling back now. Where's it going to go? I don't know. It's not the kind of chart I like to trade. Tell you the chart I like to try to trade is this one, is the S&P 500. We've got one going back over a year that didn't work. All these others, you could have jumped in here at 1 ATR, cleaned up, 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 and way cleaned up there. That opposed to this, no thanks. I'm just not interested in taking that kind of risk, but you can. That is where we are, folks. God bless my friends. And again, everything we talk about here is in regards to practice trading. We're not a stock calling, Bitcoin calling, gold calling, bond calling service. We're an education firm. God bless. All the best from the whole team at Charting Wealth World Headquarters.